Hey, what's up, guys? This is Technical Tim here, and I want to thank everyone so much who's been liking and subscribing to the channel. And I know I've started this new format, as you all know. Like, I'm gonna be previewing every fight in detail for the cards. And as I had told you in my first preview video, I've been a little busy this week and kind of last week. It's just because my family's all coming up here because it's my birthday. So I don't actually have time this week to do a detailed preview for every single fight. So what I'm going to do is the 8 fights remaining that I haven't detailed preview, I'm going to talk all about right now. So obviously I won't be going into like as much technique. I will on a couple, but just because I don't have as much time in this video. But I just want to get it all to you and all the information and kind of like my general thoughts on these fights remaining, just so you have all of my info. But I think going forward, as I said, I'm going to detail every fight. And if there ever is a week kind of like this week where I can't get to every single one, I'll just send like a final thoughts type of video like I'm doing right now for that card, just so you hear me at least talk about every single fight, if that makes sense. So let's get going. I'm going to start at the bottom of the card. Cole Smith and Mitch Gagnon. Current odds are about even, and I'm laying off this fight. There's only a little bit of tape on Cole Smith. I tend to think that he's going to grind Gagnon out, and I think his decision line at plus 275 was a good line earlier in the week, but it had gotten hit a little bit. But I tend to think he's going to grind him out, but I had just seen fights a long time ago, but his amateur fights, of him kind of losing some weird positions, and I wouldn't be all that surprised if Gagnon finished him. But Gagnon's super susceptible to wrestling. I tend to think Smith is going to win that one, but no heavy strong opinions. If Smith was plus money, I'd play him, but I don't always like playing debutants when they haven't fought too many good fighters, so there's that. We talked about Bullard Adams. Go watch that preview. We talked about Nelson Sayles. Go watch that preview. Taleb and Prepolek. I taped it a little bit. Taleb should probably win. I wouldn't play him as that big of a favorite because he is aging and he's susceptible to like being hit at times as well. But Prepolek is way undersized here, and short notice, he's probably not going to win this fight, just because he hasn't had the proper time to train. So I do kind of like in that fight. I don't know if I'll play it like heavy or anything. I like fight doesn't go to decision at plus 155. You can get it right now because usually debutants if they're fighting in short notice, those fights tend to not go to the cards. So I think that's a pretty decent, and Taleb's a decent finisher too. Zahabi Morales, no strong opinions. I think it's probably going to be a pretty close fight, and the hometown guy with the judging should probably be a little bit of a favorite. So I have no strong opinions on that fight either. So I'm going to stay away for the most part. Morales has got some pretty good boxing, but Zahabi's not bad. I've been pretty impressed with him in a few fights. I wouldn't say pretty impressed, but he's a decently well put together fighter, and he probably has the ground advantage here as well. So I have no action there. Chase on Morass I've already covered. Sanchez and Barrialt. I taped this a while ago and got in on Sanchez whenever he was actually like even money, and I arbitraged out because I was able to cash out. So I'm not playing the fight. I think Sanchez is rightfully the favorite now, and the line's probably come to where it should be. But I arbitraged out of that because I knew money was going to come in on Sanchez on that. So I pocketed a little bit of change there. Harris Spivak. I'm playing Harris in this matchup, and this is one I'll kind of talk about a little more in depth. Tape aside, I kind of tweeted this out on my Twitter as well. You guys, like, there's a trend by the bookmakers, and statistically they're getting torched on the books. I wonder when they're going to make an adjustment. where they'll kind of just put, like, there's an undefeated kind of can crusher. Like, I hate to be derogatory to Spivak, but he hasn't beaten anyone good. He's beaten Fulton and Lopez, and they're 45 years old. And he's really not beat UFC level competition. And there tends to be a trend with these guys who are undefeated against really bad competition. Then they'll be fighting like UFC level fighters, and the lines will be close. And like they'll kind of default a line of the veteran at like minus 150, and they should usually be lined a lot different than that. Like, and statistically, UFC debutants usually lose their fights. Like there's the overwhelmingly amount of debutants lose their UFC debuts, and Spivak, he like, I just feel like he should be a bigger underdog here. It's a little bit of an assumption, but whenever you can't really tell how good someone is on tape, it's better just to use numbers and let numbers do it for you. And even just like if you look at kind of like the recent trends of this year, even like Davis should have probably been lined a little heavier against Costa. Randomly, like, what was another one? Calderwood was like a big underdog against Lipsky, and Lipsky actually looked fine on tape and Spivak doesn't. But you just see whenever these guys end up coming in and fight UFC level competition, they can't just go out there and get first round finishes. It could happen, it's MMA, but that's really hard to do against a well put together fighter. What are some other ones? I think Morose and whoever she just fought, or Morose and I forget the fight, but I remember the debutant ended up getting smashed in that fight. Was it Mazo and Morose? I can't really remember. But the data just shows that the veteran should be a pretty big favorite, usually. I think it's like 65 to 70% of debutants lose their debut. And then if you go to this matchup specifically, Spivak doesn't look that good on tape. His hand speed is not nearly as fast as Harris, and Harris, like, has beaten some legitimate fighters. Like, he beat Andrei Arlovsky. He can be low output at times, and he has his flaws, but people are making too much of holes in his ground game because, like, Verdum submitting him, that's a totally different ball game, and Spivak didn't look like some, like, world-class grappler by any means, and there's a big athleticism advantage here, and in the southpaw orthodox matchup, I think Harris is going to land. That opens up his left body kick, which is a big weapon for him, and his hands are faster in this matchup. Could Spivak win? Sure. And we don't really know exactly how this is going to, how good he really is. But just, since we don't, let the numbers just take care of it. And just, you got to generally, sometimes you can tell if someone's good on tape. On this one, it's like, okay, he's beaten a bunch of bad fighters, and he doesn't look all that good on tape. I don't know. I think Harris is an easy play. If you told me that Harris was lined at minus 300 to minus 350 here, I wouldn't argue. I'd be like, yeah. He was lined around that against Spitz. And Spitz is probably like, he would maybe be like an even money fighter against, he would maybe be lined even money against Spivak, to be quite honest. I don't know. I don't get it. I would much rather, if I lose a bet like this, I'd much rather be on the guy who's actually proven. Like if you lose money and betting Spivak, I don't feel sorry for you. If you lose money betting on Harris, I'd be like, oh, well, you made a logical assumption and it just didn't work out. And statistically, you're gonna win if you play the Harris side in fights like this 100 times throughout the year. Eventually you're going to win. Just the numbers prove it. So I think this is pretty easy. And just like, even from a tape point of view, even though it's kind of hard to tell to completely gauge Spivak, I just don't think he looks very good. And I think he's going to be at a big disadvantage in the striking. In one of his fights, it was a while ago, it was like really the only guy who actually made him move backwards. He started landing kicks and things, and I think Harris is just going to walk him down and put him away, to be honest. So I think Harris is a no-brainer bet Just let numbers do the talking for you on that one. Merab and Katona, I think Katona's pretty tough. Like, I like his game, but I think Merab's being very underrated as a wrestler here. Like, people like know he's a good wrestler. I don't think they know how good he is. Like, Frankie Saenz and Ricky Simone, people are kind of bashing Merab's top game, but Merab, like, Ricky Simone is a legit wrestler. I mean, he's really good. He's top 3 at bantamweight in wrestling, no doubt. And Merab was able to get so many takedowns, and even though he wasn't able to hold him down on the mat a lot, he was able to get his back standing and get clasped hands and hold position there. And Brad Katona was getting held down a lot versus Mitchell in the Ultimate Fighter fight. And Merab's a much better wrestler than Mitchell. So I think that was a red flag to me. I do think Katona's a pretty dangerous submission grappler. I could see him getting a back take and maybe like a rear naked choke or something. I do think that's possible, but I think, and I do fear his low kicks on the feet a little bit, but I tend to think Merab's pace and just kind of relentlessness and his wrestling is going to wear Katona down. Katona's got some pretty good cardio himself, but I think Merab is a legitimate freak when it comes to pace and cardio. Like, this is not going to be a fight like against Matthew Lopez where Lopez gasses out. Like, Katona's going to be facing a storm here. And I think the wrestling advantage is going to be pretty big here. And I think people don't realize how good of a wrestler Merab is because he wasn't able to hold an elite wrestler like Simone down. But he out-wrestled Simone, and Simone out-wrestled Montel Jackson, who is an alternate on the Greco-Roman U.S. team. So it's like, I think Merab's just going to get a lot of takedowns, be relentless, and just come away with a pretty clear decision, like 30-27, 29-28 type of decision. I do think Katona's tough, but I played Merab around like minus 160, and the line's getting, I could see people like backing Katona. I get the argument for him. I think people are just not gauging Merab's wrestling appropriately here, just because the barometers that they're using and the gauge they're using is versus Simone and Saenz, who are both legitimate wrestlers. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Burgos and Swanson. I think Burgos should win this fight. I don't think I'm going to play it, but I think he's going to land his jab a lot, and I don't like it. A lot of people are kind of like talking about Swanson's chin not looking good because he got landed on a job on by Moicano. And then other people are kind of saying, hey, you're overblowing that knockdown. I'm kind of in between. I don't think it looked good, that jab versus Moicano going down, but Swanson hasn't been like really hurt a lot in a lot of fights either. But I do think he's going to eat a lot of jabs here. So I think the accumulation of jabs could maybe give him some issues. Burgos is hittable, but usually it's with punches, like quick punches, and I don't think Swanson's that good of a puncher. So I think Burgos is probably going to kind of walk him down and just be busier and land a lot of clean jabs. And he might finish Swanson, but I'd say the line is probably pretty close to accurate. Like, I think Burgos should be a bit of a favorite, but not the strongest opinions there. Theodoro Brunson, you guys know my opinion on that. And then Iaquinta Cerrone. I think the line's accurate. Like, I was leaning Cowboy for a little bit, and then the more I taped, I'll briefly talk about this, but I'm not playing it, and I don't want to waste too much of your time, but the more I taped, the winner of this fight is going to be the one who moves forward. They both do their best work when they're backing their opponent up with strikes, and they both start to get landed on against, opponents, against people whenever they're kind of getting pushed back. Like, that's when you can really land hands on Cerrone. And Al does his best work when going forward, but then Cerrone, I think, will have a lot of success against Al, kind of like Masvidal was, with kicks and different strike variety if he's starting to push Iaquinta back. The thing is, Cerrone tends to not be walking forward as much as Al, and I really feel like Cerrone could win this quite easily if he was putting Al on his back foot throughout the fight. But I think they're going to be kind of trading. They're going to be trading as the advancing fighter throughout the fight, so I think that makes it hard to call and a clear stay away, in my opinion. I do think Cerrone's better on the floor, for sure, but Al's like legit there too. So I tend to think if someone gets someone on the floor, it'll be Cerrone, and on the feet, I think it just depends on who's going forward more, and it's kind of hard to predict. It just depends on who kind of like takes control of leading the fight. And I don't have the strongest opinions on that one, but that's all I have. Thank you so much. Sorry, I kind of rushed this one, but I wanted to get most of my thoughts out there kind of quickly just so you had it all for the fights. My opinions kind of might change, and I'm going to be putting my official picks on my Bet MMA page. I only charge $8 an event. If you want to buy them, go ahead and buy them. I'll have some props on there and things like that. But thank you so much. Bye.